Young women who sought freedom and equality for racial minorities and campaigned for social justice for the poor and opportunity for the disadvantaged could not escape seeking those things for themselves too. Their experiences in social movements for others soon turned to questions of why they could not liberate themselves. Every successful husband needed a wife, according to Professor Patricia Alberg Graham, the historian and academic who herself became a wife in the 1950s. Though she herself had a PhD, she could not focus on her own work in the early years of her marriage. Instead, she put her career on hold while her husband finished his training. Events of the 1960s encouraged impatience with that way of acting and thinking. Women, sometimes educated, sometimes ready for professions, sought to live as they chose and to construct families or not as they wished. In a movement that we call the Cultural Revolution, women began to reject the dictates of consumption and tradition and to assert a new value system based on freedom. They might separate themselves from their families of origin, give up excess possessions, move to communes to live lives based on sexual liberation. We call these young people flower children. At the heart of the Cultural Revolution lay the goal of ending sexual repression and promoting sexual freedom. Suddenly, many of the young rejected the notion of marriage altogether, preferring instead to shed the constraints of state regulation and to raise liberated offspring. But women of the 1960s quickly discovered that their sexual liberation paralleled the sexual liberation of men who could and did exercise their freedom without taking any responsibility for the consequences of their acts. The excitement of free sexuality produced babies for whom women remained primarily responsible, and liberation did little to enhance the self-esteem of heterosexual women. Rather, the absence of monogamous commitment created inordinate pressures on women who could make few demands on free men. The movement for sexual liberation had two other ongoing consequences. The first involved the push to make birth control accessible to all women and to decriminalize abortion. These produced the landmark court cases that permanently altered conceptions of women's control over their own bodies. The second legitimized women's desires to shed dependence on men by turning to other women for sexual satisfaction and for emotional and other forms of sustenance as well. By the end of the 60s, notions of women-only meetings, safe spaces for women, lesbian separatism, and woman power had become part of the vocabulary. Together, these inspired notions of radical feminism, the idea that equality and freedom could be achieved only if women were released from the systemic oppression asserted by patriarchal society. Women, radical feminists argued, needed control of their own bodies and freedom from familial and cultural coercion in order to thrive. Male-dominated education, values, and culture were destined to imprison women. That could mean freeing oneself from bourgeois culture, consumer values, and capitalism, all of which were complicit in the oppression that denied women their freedom.